I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my background. I currently serve as the Associate Minister to Pittsburgh Presbytery. I've been in that role for a little under 4 years. This is a little bit about me and my family. There in the shirt, the red shirt, is my wife, Renee. We met in college and got married shortly after seminary. And then we have 2 kids, Andrew there in the middle. Andrew is 12. And that dashing young lady is my daughter, Meredith, who just turned 11 today. Actually, it's her 11th birthday. As I said in the bio, I've been a lifelong geek. I started using a Mac computer when I was 4. My uncle set me in front of his on Thanksgiving in 1985, I think it was, and have steadily been involved using technology since then. Did my undergraduate degree at Grove City College in physics and computer science. So continued on that path, did some work with Xerox Corporation in database development and design, and then was called to ministry. So I took that physics and computer science degree and jumped in and went straight to seminary. Graduated from Pittsburgh Seminary in 2006 and accepted a call to the Hampton Presbyterian Church, which is located here in the North Hills of Pittsburgh. Served there for 10 years before joining the staff of Pittsburgh Presbytery. In 2012, this is a true story, although it doesn't sound it. In 2012, I met a guy via Craigslist, and we started a business together. I had always had an interest in photography. I'd done some sports photography when I was in college, and I found out that I had bought too much equipment. And he and I went together, and we started a rental company, renting camera equipment. And it started out very small, grew and grew and grew. And in 2015 and 2016, we were the largest camera rental company in Pittsburgh. We didn't do commercial broadcast TV stuff. That was a whole different realm we didn't get into. But we worked with high-end cinema cameras. We worked with wedding photographers. We worked with people going on vacation. We worked with all kinds of people in all kinds of settings. And at the risk of name dropping, I worked with the BBC on a project. I worked with Sony Pictures on a couple projects when they were shooting movies here in Pittsburgh, and I worked with Dancing with the Stars, which, by the way, was as cool as it sounds. So had some opportunities to kind of work the whole spectrum, from very low end, kind of people starting out in photography, wanting to rent equipment, try stuff out, to the very high end for broadcast level production. So kind of saw it all. Along the way, toward the end of that, live streaming became a bigger thing, both for businesses and for sports teams. So worked with a couple different companies on doing some live streaming stuff, on getting them some technological solutions that fit their budget. So I've been at this live stream thing for quite some time. So what I wanted to do today was to simply give you a technical overview. And that's what I need to emphasize. This is going to be a technical talk, okay? So if you are sitting there in 5 minutes and going, Brian, this is all mumbo jumbo technical stuff, I'm sorry, I can't make this not technical. This is technical content, it's technical material. I'm going to do my best. I talked it through with my wife last night, actually, to like see if my language, if I was explaining things well, and she said I did a pretty good job. So we'll see what all of you think when I'm all said and done presenting here. But I first became convinced to do this webinar because when all this hit, when all of COVID-19 hit, when we all went into lockdown mode, I watched friends and colleagues dive headfirst into the world of video production and editing. And that's a world that I've been in for a long time. I've done a lot of it. I've done my own projects. I've edited like full-length productions. I've done it all. And I know firsthand that it's not easy to learn. But my wife, we found out we were kind of shutting down on Thursday, and 72 hours later, she had a 6-minute online kids' church video that we had shot, edited, and posted. And as we were talking last night, I said, you know, part of the reason that became so easy for you is that all the tech was worked out for you. We already owned the cameras, we already owned the equipment, we already owned the computers to edit, we already owned the editing software. She had messed around with it on some small projects before. All the tech was just in place and it worked. And one of the things that I'm convinced, and I've read this in countless articles from Andy Crouch to others, that for the next year, at least, providing some sort of online virtual worship is going to be critical to the effectiveness of the mission and ministry of our congregations. And I actually think, and this is Andy Crouch's quote, we abandon this technology to our own peril. Because not only will it be sometimes truly necessary to gather at all, in the near-term future, we're going to be in a space where we're going to be able to gather in some way. Now that could be a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, depending on where you are in the country. It's going to be different for everybody, but we're going to be able to gather at some point in the future. And the goal of this webinar is to get you thinking about the things you need to figure out now, so that when that day comes, you're not scrambling like we all had to kind of figure out video editing and production and posting, so that you can begin thinking through some of those things, okay? So live streaming is not an easy thing. It's very technical. It's multi-part. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. But the goal of this is to kind of get you thinking about the 5 aspects that are technical that you need to think about now, that you can begin to think about now, that you can begin to research products, talk to the people in your churches and get an idea, so that when you're able to gather, you're able to live stream. The other thing that I would say is that the move toward live streaming is not just COVID-19 related. One of the things that I have noticed, and I've heard from pastors, is that they have people tuning in who moved away a long time ago. My heart is warmed by stories of young adults who are living in very different parts of the country, who haven't found a church, maybe have no interest in finding a church where they live now, who've kind of checked out of church. But since their home church, since the people they know and love and grew up with, because they're online, they've been tuning into those services. As somebody who has younger kids, but not young kids anymore, I remember the days of having like a 3 and a 5-year-old. And like, I wish that there were mornings where when the kids didn't get up on time, when the kids were sick, for our young families, online virtual worship is a gift. And our churches in general don't do a real great job in interacting and engaging with those types of families. So there's so many things. It's not just about COVID-19. This is something, honestly, we probably should have been doing for the last 5 years, but nothing pushed us there. Well, we've been pushed there now. And I think now is the time to really, to embrace this and to move ahead and to dive headfirst into this. My goal today is to just kind of give you an overview, okay? So right before all this broke, my wife and I got to go to San Francisco. We did an Enneagram coaching training out there, and we were about 10 minutes from the Golden Gate Bridge. So we went down, and you can see this picture of my wife holding up the Golden Gate Bridge. And my question for you is, what's the most important part of a bridge? The answer is every part. Every single part of a bridge is important. If you're driving on a road and the shoulder's kind of sketchy, you can kind of move over, right? You can avoid that. You can avoid a pothole on a road. But if a bridge, if a support is bad, that's not good. If part of the deck is bad, that's not good. Like literally every part of a bridge is important. And if one part goes out of line, the whole bridge is suddenly in jeopardy. Well, that's the analogy that I want you to use when it comes to live streaming, right? Every part of this bridge is important. Every piece, every aspect that we're going to talk about is important, because you can have 4 of these 5 aspects, great. And if your 5th aspect isn't good, then your broadcast is simply not going to work, okay? So that's what I want you to think about. There's 5 aspects I'm going to talk about, and you've got to have kind of all 5 aspects kind of nailed down and put together, or just like a bridge, the whole thing could come down, okay? Before I get to that, I want to talk about 3 key points before I go. Number 1, live streaming is complicated and multifaceted with numerous ways it can go wrong, even if it worked perfectly the week before. Even if it worked perfectly the week before. I am well set up here in my upstairs office to live stream. I've got a TV with my presentation. I've got a camera right there. I've got a monitor right here. I've got the rest of my computer right here. And this morning, I had to unplug and replug 2 things to get the dumb thing to work, okay? So numerous things can go wrong. It requires a decent amount of technical knowledge. Second, the best live streaming solution for your church is entirely dependent on your context and ministry goals. There is no one-size-fits-all. If you're in a 1,500 member church with a sanctuary that can hold 600, you need a different solution than if you're in a 50-member church with 25 people in worship with a sanctuary capacity of 150. Okay, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And the most important element for live streaming isn't actually technical; it's human resources. What you and your people know and can do, and do it well. All right. So I'm going to kind of give you a framework, but you've got to figure the solution out for yourself. I can't I can walk people through it. I can help them figure it out, but this is critical. It's human resources. What do you know? What do your people know? What can you do and what can you do it well? Your space, all those kinds of stuff, right? So that's a giant disclaimer to say everything I'm going to tell you from here on out may work in your context. It may not. I'm going to do my best to kind of generalize it, but there's going to be a lot that you're going to kind of have to figure out. My goal is to kind of help you answer some questions, or to ask some questions to help you figure all it out. So here we go. There's 5 technical aspects I'm going to talk about: recording, capturing, broadcasting, local network, and internet, your upstream internet connection. These are the 5 things, 5 components that you absolutely have to have and have them figured out, okay? And here's a little graphic for those of you who are graphically oriented. If you're sitting there saying, wow, Brian didn't major in art, you're right, I didn't. This is pretty good for me, right? But we start with you and what's going on live most often in your sanctuary. That gets recorded and then captured, then broadcast, sent across your local network out to the internet and out to your people, right? And I want you to think of those planks as planks on a bridge. If one of those goes out, then the whole thing could go down, okay? So let's start talking about recording. What do we need to record? Well, the most common platform to record is a camera, but there's a whole bunch of different types of cameras, and I'm gonna kind of walk through 5 different types of cameras and give you a rough idea of price and the best place to use each of these different types of cameras, okay? So we're gonna start with a traditional camcorder. I actually have one right here, right? These big things, I carry it around to places. I take it out when my kids have events and stuff. They say I look like an 80s dad. I'm proud of that. But traditional camcorders are an all-in-one solution. They've got the lens, they've got the recording, it's all built in. They have an AC power plug, which is really important for live streaming so that your battery doesn't die in the middle. They can be remote controlled in many cases. You can attach a little remote control by a cord. You can zoom them, you can turn them on, you can turn them off. They're really good for all-around use. The other thing I like about camcorders is they can be used for other projects, right? They're not just limited to being used for live streaming. So all around, the traditional camcorder is usually my go-to, okay? Is usually my go-to. Now, I'm showing you on the screen 4 different camcorders, all right? I'm gonna tell you that the one that is on the far left of the screen is a $3,000 camcorder. The one in the middle is a $1,500 camcorder. The next one's a $900 camcorder. And the one after that is a $200 camcorder. So they run the range depending on the features, okay? So like the ones to the right have bigger sensors. They actually have a bigger piece of circuitry that actually captures the image, right? So you're gonna get a better image out of a more expensive camcorder. But what you need to know, and I'll come back to this a couple times, is so much of this is gonna come down to what your sanctuary looks like. If you are in a bright, well-lit sanctuary, you don't actually need as good of a camera because the brighter light will make it easier for a smaller, more affordable camera to reproduce a good-looking image. But if you are in a dark cathedral, then you're gonna need a much, much different camera solution than actually even one of these to get a really good image. There's also some differences on audio features and things like this. I'm gonna walk through some specific solutions at the end with some specific models, but just wanted to kind of give you, this is what I'm talking about. This is my go-to. This is my go-to for live streaming. I love these things. They're so easy to use. They're integrated. If you've got a single camera and you need to like move it, like, once the choir's done singing and you want to focus on the pastor, they're easy to move. They're easy to zoom. They're all in one. They've got AC power. There's so many things about traditional camcorders that I love, and they usually are my go-to for live streaming type stuff. Okay, so one option is a traditional camcorder. The next, these are newer on the market, and these are designated streaming cameras. I'm showing you Mevo, which is one of those popular brands. These are cameras that were designed from the ground up for live streaming. So they're small, they're highly portable. In many cases, they're battery powered. They are designed to have multiple cameras all at the same time. And what's great about these is these often provide a one-step solution. You buy 3 Mevo cameras, you link them together, you connect them to the software on your computer, and you're good to go, okay? So these in a lot of ways are really nice. On the other hand, there's some real downsides to these. Number one, they tend to be small. So in low lighting, they're not as strong, number one. Number two about these, they're really not useful for other things. It's not like a camcorder or even a regular camera that I'm gonna show you next that you can use for other things. But in your space, this may be great. They're battery powered, good thing and bad thing. For us, most of us don't want to be wondering if the cameras are charged before every single Sunday comes. But definitely, if you're in a larger space especially, and you've got the budget, a Mevo solution can be really, really good for you because it's small, it's portable, and you may not need to use these for multiple things. So these are definitely an option for some of you. All the rage right now is to shoot video on what are called DSLRs. I should say, I actually forgot to say this at the beginning. I have no financial incentive in any of this content. I don't work for Canon. I don't promote Canon. The thing is, I know Canon the best because that's what I rented the most. So that's why all my pictures will be Canon. If you or your people like Panasonic or Sony or JVC, that's fine. You don't need to use Canon by any means. It's just what I'm most familiar with. So that's why I used it. DSLRs started doing video about 15 years ago or so, and they produce amazing quality video, absolutely amazing quality video. If you use a DSLR for live streaming, you will get a better image quality. It'll be deeper. The colors will be richer, especially in a dark space. They're going to way outperform anything else that I'm going to show you today. I love shooting video on DSLRs. That being said, there's some huge downsides for live streaming. Number one, they don't come with an AC adapter. They don't come with something you can plug into the wall. So you either have to run it on battery and hope your battery doesn't die in the middle of the service, or you have to buy a separate AC adapter setup, okay? Now you can do that. I actually own one. I'm actually using it, truly, to be honest, right now, but they're not cheap. And often the cheap ones are imported from Asia, and they're not always the best quality. So if you go with the brand name AC adapter kits for a DSLR, you're talking about a couple $100 more. And the truth is, these cameras start more expensive than a camcorder. So for example, the one on the far left, that is a kit, runs $850 new. The one in the middle runs $550 new. The one on the right runs $1,000 new, okay? So your upfront cost is higher to get these because they do more. They've got a bigger sensor. They've got more power in a whole lot of ways. But it's more expensive to buy in, and then some of the accessories to make it work are more expensive. The other thing is that they're not really designed to do live stuff over 30 minutes. There's all kinds of reasons for that, but they're not designed for this type of work. They'll work for it in a pinch, but they're not designed for it. Specifically, they don't have power zoom lenses. So if you're going to be using it, and then you're going to want to like relocate it, as I gave the example where the choir is singing the anthem, or the band is singing a song, and then you want to shift to the person who's preaching, you're going to have somebody reach around and adjust the zoom and kind of twerk it around. It's not going to look smooth. And it's going to require a little bit more work. It's going to require a little bit more of an operator to make this solution work. That being said, if you're in a really dark space, this may be your only option. This may be your only option because the image quality is going to be so much better in a dark room than you'd get with a camcorder. PTZ surveillance cameras, these are really fun. If you go to a local contractor and say you want to do live streaming, most likely they're going to direct you to these. A couple reasons. One, they tend to have one cable that plugs into the back of them that runs everything. They mount to the wall easily. They can be remote controlled. They don't need batteries. They're fabulous. They're also about $1,500 to $1,800 a piece. So if you need 2 or 3 of them in your space, you're immediately up over $4,000. That's before you get into any of the other parts. So they're much, much more expensive, but they also are awesome. And in some of your settings, if you're in a bigger setting with a bigger budget, this may be exactly what you need because they're incredibly flexible. They have a lot of the advantage of dedicated streaming cameras, except that they're wired in, which provides a lot more stable connection and allows remote control and power and all those kinds of things. So PTZ and surveillance cameras can be a huge, huge win in the right setting, but again, they are very expensive. So that's going to be for those of you who are looking at kind of bigger budget options. And last but not least, cinema cameras. These are incredibly high end. The one on the left is $2,700. The one on the right is $7,500. These are very high end solutions. In the largest settings, you'll find cinema cameras. They're incredible. If you're going to have people operating cameras and things like that, by all means, consider these. I love cinema cameras. I used to own them. I used to rent them. These are the type of things that they use in very professional settings. For most of you, this isn't an option, but I did want to put it out there. The cinema cameras kind of provide the best of both worlds, incredible image quality, very flexible use for long-term recording. But again, for most of you, this isn't going to be what you're looking for. For most of you, my recommendation is going to be to look at a camcorder or a dedicated streaming solution. But most of you, it's going to be a camcorder. And let me explain a little bit why I really like the camcorder in a minute. Next is talking about sound. So what's interesting about live streaming is the most important part of a live stream is not your video, it's actually your sound. A bad live stream is one that has no sound or has bad sound. If your sound is hard to hear, if it's garbled, then that's not good. You actually can get away with lower quality video than you can lower quality audio. Your audio, ironically, is most important, okay? What I always say is this: whatever sound system you have, find a way to connect your existing sound system into your live stream, okay? So for example, if you're gonna use a camcorder, I got mine right here. On most camcorders, there is actually a jack where you can plug a headphone type cable in. And if you can pull it out of your soundboard, your sound system, your amplifier, whatever you have, most of our churches have some kind of digital sound system at this point. Whether you have to split it, whatever you have to do, this is the way to do it, all right? This is about the only thing that I'll say. This is where I think it is one size fits all. It's very hard to convince me it's ever worth doing something that doesn't involve taking it right out of your sound system. And the reason is it simply builds on resources and assets you already have. So if you have choir mics, if you have a lectern mic, a pulpit mic, if you have wireless mics, whatever you have, the great part about using your sound system already is you've already got all that stuff. It just repurposes it, right? I've shown you 4 different cables on the bottom. It could be any of those cables or something else. It's going to entirely depend on your system. It may be as easy as, a simple aux cable as they become known. It may be something like a 1/4 inch. It comes out of a soundboard. It may be a RCA, which is the red and white ones, or it may be a full XLR out of a soundboard. This is entirely going to depend on what kind of system you have. I've tried to show you some of the options as far as cables and what to look for. But whoever manages your sound, talk to them, because this is the one thing you don't want to be trying to manage 2 sound systems, right? One lapel mic causes enough problems. You don't want to say to your pastor, here, you need to wear 1 lapel mic for the sanctuary and 1 lapel mic for the live stream. Please don't do that to your people. By all means, take whatever you have in your existing sound system and go from there. There's kind of 2 different ways to do it, by the way. You either can take the sound system, if you're using a single camera setup, take the feed from your sound system and pipe it right into the camera. I think that's a very simple solution. Or you can pipe it right into your computer, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a second. The next thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take the audio and the video that you've recorded out of your sound system and from a camera, and you're going to have to feed it into a computer, okay? And most of these devices are USB based devices now. There are some that are PCI based that actually go inside the computer, but for most of us, we're going to be looking at USB based devices. And the most important thing that I want you to hear is you want to find one that says hardware encoding or hardware encoder, which means that the device does the work, not your computer. There's 2 different types of these devices. One, and I've actually got one on the screen right now, is from Elgato. It's called the CamLink. It's great. It's cheap. It's small. It plugs right in. But what it doesn't do is that it requires your computer to take the audio and video that's coming in, and then it's saying to the computer, you convert it. You make it into something that can then be sent out to the internet. And that taxes your system. So you need a newer, faster, more powerful computer to use a system like that, okay? The other complicating factor is, well, that might work for 5, 10, 15 minutes. Eventually, especially if you're using a laptop, it's going to get hot because it's going to be using your system heavily because you're going to be broadcasting with it and you're going to be trying to capture. And then your computer's going to slow down because it's going to overheat. And then your image quality and the production's going to go downhill, right? Hardware encoding, hardware encoder takes the signal, it does all the work for you in an external device, and then feeds it right into your computer, just like a webcam, all right? So I actually used to use a CamLink. That was what I started live streaming with because it was easy, it was cheap, we already owned it. but I was having all kinds of issues on my laptop. After about 5 minutes, it would slow right down and the live stream would just dive in quality, right? I now own one that has hardware encoding, and it's actually the AverMedia Live Gamer series that I've posted there. And this is a great little box. It's actually sitting right on my desk right here, and it takes the signal from my camera, wires it right in, and it is simply fantastic. I have done hour-long Zoom calls, hours long, and had no issues at all. It's incredibly smooth, incredibly powerful. So that's why I really strongly recommend that type of stuff. I've actually shown you two. These are two I recommend. So I'm actually going to give you specific recommendations. The one on the top is the AverMedia Live Gamer. That's great if you're doing a single camera. It's great for single camera. The Blackmagic ATEM Mini is on the bottom. That's great if you're doing multiple cameras. And here's the other great part about both these devices. Both of these devices show up on your computer as if they were a webcam. So you don't have to have an extra program or anything. It is as easy as plugging them in, opening up Facebook Live, YouTube Live, whatever, Zoom, and selecting it as your camera and turning it on. It's that simple. Other solutions require some kind of app in between it that you have to configure, and then you have to connect it to Facebook Live or to YouTube Live using long codes and server addresses. It can be done, but it's not easy. These two devices, the reason I love them so much is that they turn your setup right into what's the equivalent to a webcam. They're incredibly easy. Unfortunately, they're all back ordered, by the way. You can't buy any of this stuff now, but they're absolutely phenomenal. I highly recommend them. But look for hardware encoding or hardware encoder. You can use other devices. I mentioned some of the Elgato devices on there. I like them. They're reliable. They do require newer computers to use. I did also want to mention briefly Sling Media Studio. That's a very popular one. What Sling Media Studio does is that it creates a hub, and then it has adapters for your cameras. So you buy 2, 3, 4 cameras, mount them, put the Sling Media transmitters on them, and it connects to the Sling Media Studio. It's a wonderful all-in-one solution. It's expensive. The hub alone's $1,000. Each camera adapter is $200. So if you buy the hub and 3 of the adapters, you're at $1,600 plus the camera. Again, it can be a great solution. The other thing that I will say is that wireless technology is not, I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan of anything wireless. It's one more hiccup. It's one more thing that can go wrong. I think everything should be wired if at all possible. It's far more reliable. It's not subject to interference. So that's why solutions that are wireless, like the Mevo, like the Sling Media Studio, they just make me nervous because it's just one more thing that actually can go wrong, okay? I did want to briefly mention some DSLRs, and this has become popular quite a bit, can actually be connected to USB directly to a computer. So you actually can use them like a webcam. There's 2 things you need to know if you've got a DSLR. Number 1, the quality is not as good as if you use a HDMI cable. And number 2, the audio from the camera is not transferred. So you have to have an external way to get the audio in. So some of you might be saying, Brian, I own a Nikon D3200 or I own a Canon Rebel. I just want to use that. Great, you can. And their software, most of it runs like $50 to $70 for a license that lets you turn your DSLR into a webcam device. I'm not against that, especially if you already own it, if you want to start there. But do know you're going to be sacrificing some quality. You're still going to run into power issues with longer services, and you're going to have a separate way to kind of get that audio fed into your system. But it is an option. Next is to broadcast. So we've recorded it, we've captured it, it's in the computer, and then you need something to send it out. For most of us, it's going to be a computer. There are dedicated streaming devices that you can buy. They're a little more expensive. They're a little harder to use because they're not the interface we're so used to. They require some setup work. I really advocate using a computer because it's what most of our volunteers are going to be able to operate the easiest. And I come back to this again. Some require dedicated software. Others show up as a webcam. I love the webcam solutions. I love the things that show up just like a webcam. They're so much easier to use. When I got into live streaming, we had to use open broadcasting and some of these other programs. There were glitches, there was issues, there's one more thing that could go wrong. The other thing about, as I said, if you get something that works like a webcam, you can use an older computer. If you've got a computer that, I mean, my laptop was a 2013 laptop, and as long as I'm using a webcam type device, something that converts the signal into a webcam, I can use that computer to stream, no problem. The computer I'm actually streaming on right now was built in 2010, and it has no trouble live streaming because I'm using one of these webcam type devices. So, but I recommend a computer because it's the easiest. It's the one that most sort of people know. It's the one that's most familiar. It's the easiest one to troubleshoot as well. So then you're going to need to go to a computer. Now is when it gets really fun. Your LAN and your internet connection matter, okay? So a lot of us like Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi connections are great. You can connect a phone to it. You can connect a tablet to it. I hate Wi-Fi connections for streaming. I really do. Wi-Fi connections are notoriously less stable than wired connections. They just are. We don't tend to notice it because usually we're on the receiving end of connections, not on the sending end. And on the receiving end, if your connection gets a little wonky, it's okay. Your computer can automatically adjust. On the sending end, that's not true. So if at all possible, you want to be able to run a hardwired Ethernet cable into your laptop or your computer, whatever you're using to stream, right? You can use wireless. Many people use wireless. I'm just saying, for the most reliable, stable solution, find a way to wire it, okay? If you can't, then you've got to figure out, okay, how do I get the best wireless connection I can? Many of you in your churches, you get your router from your internet service provider, so from Comcast or Verizon or CenturyLink or one of those. And the truth is, the wireless routers that most of our internet service providers provide aren't really good. They don't have a really good range. You may need to actually upgrade the router inside your church, that if you have to live stream over wireless, you want to get the best router you can so that you get a nice stable connection. So wireless, so wire it in if you can. By all means, wire it in. Please wire it in. It's so much easier. If you can't, you need to really think about, okay, what kind of wireless connection do I have? How close can I get my wireless access point? All those kinds of things. That's what you're going to want to find. The last, and ironically the most important, is what is your upstream internet connection? Most of our internet service providers market on what's called the downstream connection. So you can get a 10 meg connection, a 25 meg connection, a 50, 100, a gig connection, okay? That's not what we're interested in for live streaming. It doesn't matter how fast you can receive data. It matters how fast you can send data, and that's your upstream connection. And what I'm going to tell you is that you absolutely do not want to try live streaming unless you have a solid 5 megabit per second upstream connection. At least. 10 is good, 25 is better. Like literally, you almost can't have enough when it comes to an upstream connection. Because the bigger connection you have, the more bandwidth you have, and the more margin you have if other things happen. So if other network traffic comes on, right? I've seen situations where people test with a wireless streaming setup and it's fine. And then the moment the sanctuary is full and there's 50 phones connected to the Wi-Fi, it doesn't work anymore. That's one of the issues, right? Is because all of a sudden the bandwidth you had is suddenly being consumed. This is another reason why wiring in is so much better, because it gives kind of some dedicated space. I know in some situations they have to shut off their Wi-Fi when they want to live stream because they can't. So the thing that you can do right now, you can do it today or next time you go to your church, is go to www.speedtest.net and test your connection, okay? Now, I ran mine this morning. I just want to show you kind of what you're going to see. They're going to tell you your ping, your download, and your upload. Your download doesn't really matter. You want to look at that upload number. That's the most important number. Now, as you can see, here at home, I'm spoiled. I'm very well set up for live streaming. We have Verizon gig service, right? So we're fine. You don't need 700, but you do need 5 or 10. And if it comes up and if it finds out you have a 1 megabit per second upstream connection, you either can't do video live streaming, or you need to upgrade your connection, or you need to get a different provider. If you're running on older DSL style connections, a lot of them just are not well suited for fast upstream connections, and your provider may not be able to cut it. And the truth is, and this is the piece I want you to understand, you have complete control over the camera and the sound, over the capture, over the computer you use to broadcast, and even over the network connection you have inside your church. What you have no control over directly is that connection out to the internet. And if you start anywhere, you need to start here and find out what your options are and what your connection is, right? If you go in and you've got a 50 meg down connection and a 10 meg up connection, great, you're in good shape to get started, right? 10 meg is kind of my comfort zone. If I go in somewhere and they say, hey, we want to live stream, and I run it and it's 5 doesn't give you a lot of overhead. A good live streaming feed is about 2.5 to 3.5 megabits per second. And if your ceiling is 5, that doesn't give you a lot of room. If you're running a 3.5 megabit per second feed, you got 10, that gives you some real overhead. You got 25, even better, okay? So this is actually where I'm going to advise you to start, okay? So those are the 5 parts. I know this has been technical. I hope I've made some sense. I do want to talk through a couple individual kind of packages and what I might recommend and give you an idea of some costs. So this is what a lot of people are doing. This is what I call the bare bones phone setup. And you know what? For a lot of it, you can see the category is additional cost, and the answer is it won't cost you anything except maybe a tripod and a mount for your phone, okay? Smartphone can do everything. It can record, it can capture, it can broadcast, you can have Wi-Fi in your church, and you can use your local internet service provider. It's simplest setup, but it's definitely the lowest quality. And one of the things I want you to really think about is that quality matters here more than maybe even we know. Because if this is going to be an outreach tool, if this is going to be a standard part of the form of your ministry and your church's ministry, you want to do it well. And I got to tell you, I don't care if you have an iPhone 11 Pro, I don't care if you have a Samsung Galaxy, I don't care. Your phone's not going to do it well long term. Because once we're back gathered together, you're either going to have to prop your phone in like the middle of the front of your sanctuary and have it very public, or else you're going to have it at the very back. And if it's at the very back, all you're going to get is this broad, wide-angle shot. And it's going to be hard to hear because the audio won't be as good. A lot of you, I know, have found great success using your iPhone to pre-record. Go for it. Right, that's great. It's close up. You can control it all. I have no qualms with that. But for live streaming, the phone really runs into trouble once we have to go back to being places where you're in the back of the room. It's just not going to do a really good job, okay? So I know some of you are doing live stuff now where you're like up close. Great. Phones are good for up close type video. They're good for up close type live streaming. They're just not good for live streaming for events. So this is a setup I don't recommend unless it's your only option. This is a kind of a bare bones single setup. And here's what I'm going to tell you. There's a Canon Vixia HF R800 camera. It's a very small camcorder. It costs about $200. And then you take the feed right out of your soundboard. You buy a AverMedia Live Gamer Mini. It's one of the external devices I talked about. It'll show up on your computer just like a webcam. If you do that, chances are you can use an existing computer or laptop. Hopefully your existing Wi-Fi is good enough. Maybe it's not. And maybe you go with a wired connection. Hopefully your local internet service provider is good enough. Maybe not. You might have to update that. But as far as equipment goes, you're going to need a couple other things. You're going to maybe need a tripod, a monopod. You might need some cables. So I'm going to throw an extra $150 into the budget for that. But what I'm saying is you can get a decent setup for $500. Now, I know for some of our congregations, that's out of reach, right? And then you're going to have to get more creative on what you do. But if you're starting from scratch, $500 can get you something, okay? And it's not a bad place. This is a good basic camera for a well-lit sanctuary. It can be placed at the back of the room and zoomed in nicely and can be adjusted easily and smoothly. I love this setup. This would be a great kind of starting out setup, especially for a small, even a medium-sized congregation. Like this would be a good solution for that. I actually want to show you the setup we use when we live stream. So we'll often live stream Presbytery meetings if we have a special event going on. We use a Canon XA20. It's a little bit older. We bought it a couple years ago. It's a $1,400 camera because it's got some extra audio features in it. It's got some pro audio features because we're not always in a place where we're around a soundboard. So we wanted that to be there. We use an older Elgato device. It cost us about $150 when we bought it. It doesn't show up as a webcam. That's why I don't recommend this anymore. It doesn't show up as a webcam. You have to use their software, and I just don't like it. We usually use my MacBook. Unfortunately, in the places we've done it, we've had to be on Wi-Fi. One place, it's worked really great. At Pittsburgh Seminary, we've had 0 issues live streaming. We've done a couple things that we've live streamed there, and it's worked perfectly because they've got a really robust Wi-Fi connection. They've got a really robust internet connection, and we're good. When we tried to live stream over Wi-Fi at our camp and conference center, it was a disaster. It didn't work. Between all the people in the room who were on Wi-Fi, between the setup that they had for the internet connection, it bombed. It didn't work. We had to drop the quality so much, and even then, it dropped out. We use a tripod and then just a mini HDMI to HDMI cable to connect the camera into the computer. Cost us about $16.50 when we set it up. Remember, this was a couple years ago. I just wanted to actually show you what we use now when we do live streaming. What you see is because of improvements in technology, what cost us $16.50 a couple years ago, you can now do basically the same for $500. This is a little bit better setup. This is actually what I would recommend if you can afford it on a single camera. The Canon Vixia HF G21 offers a bigger sensor, and therefore you just get a much better picture quality out of that camera. Everything else on the setup is the same, but you get a better picture quality. It's less grainy, it's richer, it looks better, it holds up better in low light. A lot of our sanctuaries, you think they're bright, they're not. If you've ever been on a broadcast sets are really, really bright. Most of our sanctuaries actually aren't that bright, and they often have a lot of shadows. So if you can spring, I actually recommend springing for a little bit better camera for this type of setup, because you're going to just get a much, much better picture out of a little bit better camera like this, like the HFG 21. This would be a DSLR. If you've got a really, really dark sanctuary, if you've got a chapel with like dark stained glass windows and camcorders just aren't going to cut it, you can do a DSLR. You do forfeit some of that flexibility, and you're going to have to find an AC adapter. So you can see for miscellaneous items, your price went up to get to that solution. But again, pretty much everything else is the same. The Canon Rebel SL3 is a new Rebel. What I like about the new Rebel is that it can connect via HDMI. A lot of the older, more affordable DSLRs, you'll look at them and you'll say, hey, I have a HDMI out on my DSLR. You do, but it's not clean. It's going to have all kinds of information and on-screen text and your settings and all that kind of stuff. The Canon Rebel SL3 offers clean HDMI output. The good news is that this is becoming a more common feature as DSLR cameras come down in price. So this is an option. So if you're in a really dark room, I might actually tell you to start with a DSLR, or because you may actually do better with this, even though you sacrifice some of the flexibility with this setup than you would a camcorder. My preferred setup, this is actually what, if somebody said, what would you recommend? This is what I would recommend if you've got a well-lit sanctuary. I actually am going to tell you that multiple cameras is easier than a single camera, and here's why. This setup would give you 3 of those small Canon Vixia HF 800 cameras. Another option would be to intermix, get 2 cheap small ones, get 1 bigger, better one. It would raise your cost a little bit, but it gets you a little better image quality. You'd upgrade to the Blackmagic ATEM Mini HDMI live stream switcher. You see, that's $300 versus the $140. But what this would let you do is it would let you fix those 3 cameras, right? So let's say you wanted a pulpit shot, a lectern shot, and a wide shot of the whole front, right? Or maybe you wanted to add a 4th camera down the road that like showed the sanctuary. Or maybe you're concerned about child safety, so during the children's moment, you want nothing, right? You can add a 4th camera that's kind of angled up and shows the stained glass windows or whatever. The nice part about this is that you can fix those cameras, and then you can just have somebody who pushes a button to change the camera view. Instead of if you've got a single camera where you're going to actually have to have somebody back there moving it around and angling it, zooming it in on the pulpit, zooming it in on the lectern, zooming it in on your band or your choir. A fixed camera, you can just push, and you may even be able to have your sound person double up and run your live stream, because they just have to sit there, mute, unmute, push 2, unmute, mute, push 1. It's going to be more work for them, But this is the advantage of using multiple cameras, is you just set them and forget them. You don't have to adjust them. You don't have to zoom in and zoom out. You don't have to worry about having the wrong shot. You don't have to worry about it being all jerky as you're trying to move it across. And the nice part about this Blackmagic switcher is, although again, it's going to cost you a little more, you've got to decide your human resource cost, okay? If you do a multiple camera setup, it sounds like it's a lot more work. It may actually, in the end, be easier to do a multiple camera setup because it's going to be more usable. You can mount them kind of all in the same spot and focus them in different spots. Plug them all into the same power strip. They're right there. I really like the idea of kind of multiple cameras as an option. I do want to talk real quickly about higher end solutions and then go to some closing comments and then come to your questions. I talked about Mevo briefly. Mevo is worth looking into, especially if you're in a larger space. I didn't spend a lot of time on it because I don't think it's a great solution for a lot of you, but Mevo is definitely an option to consider at certain points. Same thing, I mentioned Sling Studio. Sling Studio, again, if you're in a bigger setting, and you've got the budget, they are really nice. They're just thousands of dollars to even get started. And what I would recommend is that if you're looking for a higher end solution, if you're in a bigger space, you've got a bigger budget, talk to some local contractors. You'll pay more. You'll pay a lot more than you will if you do it yourself. But if you do that, if you kind of rely on a local contractor, they can probably get you a solution. They can wire it for you. They can do some of the setup work for you. And in your case, it might actually be worth it. So do some research, kind of find out who does this work in your area. It absolutely can be worth it to just get a contractor in there to do it, especially for kind of multiple point setups if your budget will allow. So some closing comments. As I said at the beginning, context is everything. What you know, what your people know, your physical space, and what you already own determines everything. You may say, Brian, I've got a Nikon D3200. I want to start with that. Okay, that's going to determine certain things about what you do. You need to find an AC adapter setup. You need to figure out how to connect that to your computer. Do that, right? You may find out that there's a guy in your congregation or a woman in your congregation who really knows a whole lot about Panasonic or has used Sling Studio at work, right? If they know that, then that may be the direction to go, okay? Like you got to kind of do an inventory of what you know, what your people know, what your space requires, what you want to do, right? Like what is your ministry goal here? What's your mission goal? Second thing is start with analyzing your upstream internet connection. Literally, it's the one thing you don't have any direct control over. You've got to either find a new provider, upgrade your provider, find out your connection's fine. Start with that. That's an easy first step. And find out what your people know. It's stereotypical, but it's a great time to grab your favorite millennial or your favorite digital native and empower them. I've noticed that, one of our local churches here, they have a 29-year-old female associate pastor who'd use iMovie. And they were able to put together really nice stuff within a week because they empowered people who were just more familiar with this type of technology. Okay, I want to talk to you a little bit about sources of where you can look. Amazon, I know a lot of people have ethical misgivings about Amazon, so I want to acknowledge that. I also want to say that for some of this stuff, it's hard to find, right? Mom and pop shops don't carry this kind of stuff. You can't go to Walmart and buy a lot of what I've just talked about. So you're going to be looking at larger retailers, and love them or hate them, Amazon carries this stuff and they have good return policies. So if it doesn't work and you need to send it back. So Amazon's a good place to start. One of my favorite spots to go is a place called B&H Photo. They're based in New York City. They are still open. They're only doing obviously delivery and pickup right now. But they have an incredible selection of cameras and live streaming equipment and accessories. They've got it all. So Amazon's great, B&H Photo is great, and I've used B&H a lot. Newegg.com is more computer-centric. They're not going to have as much of the camera stuff, but they're going to have more on the computer end and sometimes actually have better stock on some of the computer stuff. And last is a company by Adorama. They're another New York City-based camera company. They're not as popular as B&H, therefore sometimes they have stock when B&H doesn't because of everything that's happened. So much of this stuff is out of stock. So what I encourage you to do is you may need to go on to their websites. You may want to go into Amazon, B&H, Newegg, and Adorama. Once you figure out, you want to buy the Blackmagic device I talked about, or you want to buy the Live Gamer Mini, and do a request stock alert from all four because it's going to be a while. In addition to the increased demand, a lot of the manufacturing for this stuff comes out of China. So because of that, we've seen a weeks long backlog on the supply chain coming out of China. So be patient on this kind of stuff, but that's why now is a good time, right? You're probably not looking at doing this next week or the week after. So you have some time. So that covers what I wanted to cover. I'm actually going to switch over, close out of here, and try and take some questions if I can. Okay, and this is a great example of the pitfalls of live streaming. My webcam is not working right now, so I can't switch around to see you all. All right. So if you want to go ahead and raise your hand, go ahead. We're going to go to Adam first.
Thanks, Brian. First, thank you for this time and sharing of your resources. Greatly appreciate that. Two quick questions. If we want to look for a local contractor, I guess the simplest way to ask this is, how do we do that? Like if we get on Google, what do we type?
Yeah, so there's a couple different options. What I would suggest is you're probably going to need to look in good or not in some bigger cities, and try and figure it out. What I would look for is I would look for people who specialize in audio visual solutions. That's kind of the buzzword for this, is people who do audio visual solutions. So that's where I would start.
All right, thank you. Second question real quick. Words that I've seen thrown around on Facebook and in groups in terms of live streaming are things like Vimeo,
yeah,
live stream. One is Boxcast.
Yeah.
Could you speak to those
Sure,
three?
thank you.
What those are?
Yeah, so that's actually something that I didn't cover, so I'm really glad you asked. That's your platform. So once you kind of figure out all your internal technology, you're going to need to look at kind of what platform you want to use. There's a lot of different platforms out there right now. I can tell you that my go-to, my favorite at this point, that I found to be the most reliable, the most user-friendly, the most accessible, is YouTube Live. Facebook Live has had a series of issues, and some people have some real misgivings about Facebook security-wise, and some people aren't on Facebook. If you do YouTube Live, it does two things for you. One, they appear to be very reliable and stable. And number two, it enables a chat function. And what I really like about the chat function on YouTube Live is that it allows people to interact, to respond, to ask questions while they're viewing your stream. So we did here in Pittsburgh, we did for Holy Week, the Presbytery staff did some live stream and like pre-recorded stuff. And what was nice about that is that I actually pre-recorded mine and then did mine as a premiere, but it works the same in live streaming. I was able to interact and like see who was on, and people were able to say hello, and just like kind of if you're doing in the chat here on Zoom. So YouTube Live is the one that I found to be most reliable. There may be others, so I don't want to limit that one, but it seems to be the one that people are most familiar with and the one that seems to be the most reliable. Okay. Let's go to Joe.
Hey, Brian. We've been doing pre-recorded since the middle of March. We've been doing pre-recorded on a phone the whole time until this past week was our first week using our camera.
Yeah.
We spoke on Saturday about all of our sound issues. So when we tried to live stream our very first week, YouTube Live wouldn't let us live stream from a phone because our channel didn't have enough subscribers. But there's no issue with YouTube Live using any of this other equipment then?
That's actually a really good question, Joe. Not that I've run into.
Okay. We didn't know about this. The very first weekend in the middle of March, we got together on a Saturday to kind of practice everything. But we went live with the phone Sunday morning. Or no, Saturday we went live to find out that we couldn't use a phone for live streaming. You can pre-record on a phone, but you can't live stream.
Yeah, I actually just logged on to my channel to test it. And I've got like 20 subscribers, and had no issues hopping on. So that surprises me, but it's worth checking into. But
okay, I mean, we have the camera now, and right now we're doing pre-recorded. We may remain with pre-recorded, but we wanted to kind of know what our options were.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Taylor.
Thanks, Brian. I have two, one kind of question, one kind of comment. One question about internet. Yeah, if we did Wi-Fi, I guess, creating a separate, dedicated, possibly hidden network for streaming. Yeah. Just to kind of limit bandwidth for everyone else who would be there in the building. So if you have any specific advice on that, that'd be great.
Sure. So you can do that. What you have to understand is that you've got to do it in two ways. You've not only got to set up a separate Wi-Fi network, you also have to have a router that will allow you to cap the bandwidth on a network. So a lot of routers will support multiple networks. That's fine. You can do a guest network and things like that. But a lot of them don't let you cap your network. So like in that case, if you were testing and you had a 10 meg connection, you'd want to make sure you had a router that supported bandwidth limiting or bandwidth capping. So your public network, you could cap at, let's say 2. So you keep your 8 megs open for your stream. So you can do it. It's a really good idea, but you're going to have to find a router that supports that capability. Just having the ability to issue a guest network won't actually solve your problem. When I talked about our live streaming experiment at our camp and conference center, we were on the staff network and it didn't make a difference because the public network was overloaded.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. The second thing to do with audio, I appreciate, just getting a dedicated source like from a soundboard. I'll just say, because maybe this is helpful for others, in our context, we often don't have to mic everything that's on our chancel just because the acoustics of the room are pretty good, but some things are mic'd. And so a mix for a stream would be really unbalanced. And so we're looking at possibly miking some things only for the stream. It wouldn't make a difference in the room. So just throwing that out there for folks.
And that's a really good point, especially about for musicians. That's a really good point. There are certain types of mics that are kind of specifically set up for that. Most often in our sanctuaries, we find them labeled as choir mics, but you can do pencil mics, boom mics. So there are definitely some options that it's worth kind of miking for that ambient sound, and as you said, only feeding it into the stream, not feeding it into the house because you don't need it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Jeff.
The simple question, I have some very old equipment, an old camcorder and an old camera, which I think you called, I can't remember what it called, but the one that doesn't transfer the sound. How new do these products have to be? Is there an age limit on what will work and what won't work?
It just kind of depends on how old it is and what features it has. So if you have an older camcorder, but it has an HDMI output, you're set to start. You don't need something that is newer. Camcorders have had HDMI outputs on them for a couple of years. So that would kind of be the thing. Older DSLRs, older cameras, some of them can be enabled with a direct connection from a USB cord. But again, you won't carry the audio over, so you have to kind of figure out a separate solution. But you absolutely can live stream on older equipment, especially if it's a camcorder with the HDMI connection on it.
Thank you.
Michael. Whoop, let me unmute you. Sorry.
Yeah, quick question on, actually 2 questions. If you use standard, I guess, security cameras that are only using RTSP, I noticed a lot of the things that I've researched and a lot of the things that you mentioned have the HDMI inputs.
Yeah.
Do you know, there seems to be a technology out there called vMix that can capture that RTSP.
Yep.
How does that affect it? That's question one. And then question two, if we are going to use HDMI cabling, we'd kind of like to run to a center in the back. How do you hide all that cabling and all that stuff?
Yeah, so the first question, so just for the rest of you who are listening in, this is about to get really uber technical. So if what I say in the next 90 seconds makes no sense to you, don't worry about it. So the RTSP protocols allow that video to be sent over traditionally data lines, so traditionally Ethernet style lines. The newer hubs that I've seen, actually some of them offer an HDMI out from those feeds so that you can use whatever the kind of the hub is that's collecting that those surveillance camera feeds. You can then take that with an HDMI out and go right in. If you don't have that, you may need to upgrade actually the whole system. You may be able to keep the cameras, but you may need a new hub for all those cameras. The other one is that's where actually some of those have dedicated streaming capabilities built into them. So not only can you connect your cameras, you also then can connect in to a data connection and just use that as a standalone standalone streamer. I think the easiest is to probably try and figure out a hub that can feed out a HDMI signal as opposed to trying to mess with actually using that as a broadcaster. I'm not familiar with vMix as a technology, so I can't speak to that directly. But I've seen people who have had old systems that have found new sources that had the HDMI out. I was actually looking at one yesterday and I'm blanking on which one it was, but I know they're out there. I know it was on B&H Photo. So I might take a look at that one. As far as cabling, so this is where I think the argument of, hey, let's go wireless, and where like the Sling Studio solution comes in handy because it is wireless, it's easy, you just kind of park it. As far as running cables, what I love is to simply buy white cable track that sticks to the wall. It looks a little wonky at first, but it hides those cables nicely. I have to use it all over my house because my wife won't let me have cables hanging everywhere, shockingly. So I tend to find cable track to be one of the best. In some ways, some cases you can even paint it. I just love the reliability and the replaceability of cables that remain exposed. If you bury cables in the wall, if it fails, you're out of luck, right? And you either have to try and feed something back through. So I think running cable track, and that's the other reason why I like the camcorder approach, is because you can put them in the back and they have a lot better zoom capabilities than even like a DSLR. So like mine here has a 15x zoom built into it. So I can go from pretty wide to really zoomed in, and it cuts down on those kind of cable runs. So that's another argument for the camcorders. Beverly, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. I wondered about the basic needs of the computer.
Yeah.
In terms of graphics and video.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it comes in really handy what kind of capture device you're using. So if you're using, like, to put it in context, right now I'm using a Mac that was built in 2010. It's hooked into the AverMedia product that I talked about. It has the equivalent of a first generation Intel Core CPU. But because I'm letting the external device do it, it's fine.
Okay.
Now, so here's what I would say. If you've got a machine that has an Intel Core type processor, Core i5, Core i7, Core i3, you might have a shot. If you've got something that has like a Core Duo or a Core 2, forget it. That's probably going to be too old no matter what you're using. So if your laptop or your computer is in the last 5 years, you've got a chance with it. If it's older than that and it was a little better and you've maybe got a good external device, so you don't need a really new up-to-date computer. You don't necessarily need it. You might. It kind of depends on your solution. But if you've kind of got that external encoding device, they cost a little more, but the advantage is that you can use older hardware. Because the other thing is that the actual process of running a webcam is not processor intensive at all. If something's using a webcam protocol, like that drains very little power off of your CPU. So you can get away with using an older computer. The nice part about, the reason I talk about newer Intel processors is they actually have built-in graphics encoding capabilities. So they actually can encode video on the fly in real time, thanks to a technology called Intel QuickSync. So that's why newer Intel, and by the way, if you're on Mac or PC or AMD, no matter what, they all have it. That's why kind of the newer ones are better. So in general, newer is better, but that's why I really like that Blackmagic device and the AverMedia, because it lets you use older hardware.
Thank you.
Michael, go ahead.
Yes. First of all, a comment to the fellow who wondered how to bring the audio off his board. One possibility is to bring out an XLR output out of the main and run it through a Behringer audio adapter and then into the computer. That adapter costs about $30 and that does the trick. My first question is the HDMI output out of the camera. Can you put that directly into a PC, or do you have to adapt it?
You have to adapt it. I don't know of any PCs or laptops that have a built-in HDMI in. So you either have to use a USB adapter,
yeah,
or if you've got a desktop, there are PCI card versions that do the same kind of capture work.
Okay, the second question is, I have heard several places that for doing webcam live streaming, that the PC is preferable to the Mac as far as its platform.
Yeah.
Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree, because they run on the same hardware at this point. So you know, Macs and PCs both use Intel processors. You run the same stuff. I'm incredibly biased toward Mac for usability factors.
Most Mac users are.
But yeah, but I have not seen an appreciable difference in which platform is better. Most of these solutions, especially the webcam, this is actually another argument for the webcam. So when I say webcam style solutions, I mean devices that appear as a webcam. The other perk to those is that those work across the board. PCs and Macs don't need software. So the AverMedia, I have no AverMedia software installed on my Mac at all. I plugged it in and it worked. So things that use that kind of webcam protocol, it's called, that's one of the perks. Cross-platform, it doesn't matter. They work on a PC or a Mac straight out of the box.
And so you wouldn't need, or none of us would need a piece of software, something like vMix?
Not necessarily. With the newer ones that show up like a webcam, you can bypass that software completely. Some of the streaming solutions that are for multiple cameras have a software client, or even in some case a tablet client that, like, you sit there and you see what's on, like you can see the feeds that are coming in and switch cameras that way. Those are great. I saw some people who mentioned some Blackmagic solutions. Blackmagic has a client like that for some of their different products. I only recommend the ATEM Mini because it's easy. They have some higher end products that add some additional features. But that's kind of like, I like minimizing the number of things that you need. So that's why I like minimizing that need for another software client, so that you're not sitting there going, okay, we need to have this and we need to have the software running and we have to connect the software. Part of what makes, I think, using software clients frustrating is that you either have to log in directly to your, like, Facebook or YouTube account. It can be difficult to connect it to your page. It's easier to connect it to your personal one. And then you've got to do copying and pasting with the ID. So for simplicity, like, those webcam-based solutions that bypass the software are a huge benefit.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to Faith.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Faith.
So we have a huge setup that hasn't been used in years. And at one point they were recording with it. I don't know if they were going live with it. And I've spent quite a lot of time trying to learn it. So is like an outside technical solutions company, are they going to be willing to come in and figure out how and why it was set up and teach me? Or is it going to be like, well, someone else did it and I don't really want to touch it because I don't want to mess with what someone else already did? Because nobody in here knows anything about it.
Most likely an outside technical company would come in and would charge you quite a bit.
Yeah.
To figure it out, because that's part of the pain, is trying to figure out kind of how things were set up, and what to do with it. So you're kind of in a no-win there, where you've got a setup you don't know how to use. Probably your best bet is to call your old youth pastor and see if you can wrangle a favor out of him, have him come take a look at it.
Will do.
Okay, yeah, call him.
Okay, I'll call him.
The joke, for those of you who don't know, is Faith was in my youth group, so I am the old youth pastor. Michael Greer.
Oh, I just asked my questions.
Great. All right. Any other questions? I did just realize in the chat, and I hope I didn't do this. Did I share the wrong screen the whole time? Like, did you see one slide or two?
Two.
Live streaming. Everything can go wrong, even when you think you've got it nailed perfectly. All right. Keely. Wait, I can't hear you. I still can't hear you. You're unmuted, but I can't hear you. Can you go ahead and put your question in the chat? All right, let's go to Kathy.
Hi, just a really quick question, because our sanctuary is very bright.
Yeah.
And so when the light comes in from one side of the sanctuary, it just washes everything out. Any recommendations to help balance the lighting?
You know, the great architects who designed our beautiful spaces were not thinking of broadcasting, that's for sure.
True.
So there's kind of two ways to get at that. The one is I would be loath to say put blinds up. That will actually in some ways be counterproductive. What I've had to do, because actually the church I served had this beautiful clear story that lit the sanctuary great, but created nasty shadows. And part of what we had to do was we actually ended up hiding some lighting up on the other side, so that like if we were facing out, the flood of the light came in this way in the morning. We had lights hidden here that lit the other side of the chancel. You do have to do a little bit of, and this gets into some detail, but then you're going to want to do some like spotlight work and make sure that you can kind of match it color wise. You're going to want like daylight lighting for that, but that's kind of the easiest way is to try and use some electronic light, some powered lighting that is spot focused to try and balance some of that and to cut those shadows. Because it's not actually bad to have your primary light source from one side. The bad part is the nasty shadows that it creates. So if you light then from the other side with some powered lighting, you kind of cut down on some of those shadows.
Okay, thanks.
Let's see. I'm gonna go ahead to Michael Patton. Oop.
Yep. Just a quick follow-up on the HDMI cables. I looked it up, and it says the attenuation length of HDMI is 50 feet.
Yes, that's true.
In larger sanctuaries,
yeah,
is that an issue, and how do you overcome that?
Okay, it's actually really easy and affordable to overcome. And so basically what you want is you want to find a powered HDMI coupler. So when I was wiring my house, I had to put two 50-foot HDMI cables together. The challenge, of course, is that I had to have have an outlet where I could plug it in through USB, but that's what I did. So I have a 50-foot cable, and then at the coupler, it plugs in. I have seen other devices that you can power at one end. So it's a transmitter that actually powers at one end and supplies the power, and the coupler device then can draw that power through the HDMI cord. But you're looking for some kind of powered coupler. You also can do HDMI extender solutions that run over usually Cat 5 or Cat 6. They all say no image quality loss. They are all lying. Every one of them is lying. I've tried them. I've used them in my home. I've used them. They're all trash. They work, but don't expect to not get the image quality to degrade. The powered HDMI couplers work beautifully. The image quality, when I use it here at home over 100 feet, there's absolutely indistinguishable. So the powered HDMI is the way to go. Over long runs, like 500, 600 feet, then you're going to have to go with some kind of Cat 5, Cat 6 solution. How about we go to Marion?
That's me.
Yep.
Yeah, so Brian, I was interested in what you said about YouTube Live and preferring it to Facebook Live. I need to be convinced a little bit because I've already got so many people, already accustomed to using Facebook. And I also noticed that on YouTube Live, you have the option of going through Facebook.
Yeah.
When you go live.
Sure.
Is there a win-win in there somewhere?
So here's and this may have been fixed, all right? But what I do know is that YouTube Live, or the Facebook Live, had all kinds of issues in March and in April. And what I have found frustrating, because we've actually so right after all this happened, I did a couple live streams on our Presbytery page. And what I didn't like was how hard it was to find the file. And it sounds silly, how hard it was to find the file of the recording of my stream. So was one. Number two, the church that we worship at was using YouTube Live and it was using Facebook Live and had all kinds of issues with the stream dropping, the stream restarting. So there were a lot of things that just didn't seem to be going right. Whereas anybody I know who went to YouTube Live has had no trouble at all. The perk to Facebook Live, if I'm being fair, is when you go live, anybody who's logged on to Facebook who follows your page gets a notification that you're going live. So it does kind of announce it better, and you can embed your stream, right? But it also works the other way. You also can schedule a post for 9:55 or 10:55 and say, join us for worship at 11 o'clock on YouTube Live, and just have that as a scheduled post. So you can embed into Facebook, but the other thing about that is that people can't necessarily participate in the chat in the same way. So I prefer YouTube Live. I'm not saying don't use Facebook Live, but my default has been to recommend that people do go to YouTube. But if you've got an audience used to using Facebook, use Facebook, right? Like this is one of these contextual things. Like if it's working, don't fix it.
Thanks. And I'll just say within 30 minutes of the service, I post it onto YouTube as well, and then send out an email to a large to say, if you missed it, it's now on YouTube. So we kind of do get some of both.
All right. Marion, go ahead.
That was me.
Oh, that was you. Joe, go ahead.
I wanted to refer back to what Taylor asked a while ago about the miking ambient sound. Does anyone have any specific requests or suggestions for miking a piano? And just a regular upright piano, not electronic.
I've actually seen people just take a standard vocal mic and mount it right near the piano. That's definitely what we did at the church that I served was we just stuck standard vocal mic near it. And what you do want to look for that is using a omnidirectional mic that's going to pick up a little bit broader spectrum sound.
Do you know anything about the little mics? They're flat. They look like little flying saucers. We have a handful of those. Right now, that's what we have on the floor in front of the piano, but it doesn't seem to be picking it up correctly because we're going only through our sound system now for sound with our new camera. Like with the phone, it just picked up everything.
Yeah, so I've seen those. I've never used them.
Okay.
I was fortunate at the church I served that we had a sound guy who had all kinds of opinions, and I just let him do whatever he wanted.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. John, go ahead.
Yes. We've had problems with miking pianos for our live stream services, and we found a good strong mic, kind of up about 3 foot, aimed at the soundboard from behind, took care of any tinniness that we had in the stream. But it was better than just a vocal mic, I think. So then I have a question about StreamYard. Are you familiar with StreamYard?
I'm not.
Okay. That's what we're using to put our services together, and with that we can schedule a broadcast on Facebook Live, and it sets it up, and it's easy to add pre-recorded things.
Yes.
We do a couple of our members do puppets, and so they'll do a children's message with puppets, and we can easily feed that in. We can put up the words to the hymns real easy that way.
Yeah, and that's a good comment. So one of the things that kind of the next level of streaming is where you're kind of mixing some more like production features in, where you're overlaying and text overlays. So like hymns are showing up, announcements, the lower thirds identifier that this is our pastor. Those are all great things. You usually require some kind of software solution, but do add another level of features and another level of quality to your broadcast for those who are following along at home. That can be where some of the more expensive capture devices can come in really handy, because again, they have a software client. It does require the extra client, so it's not quite as straightforward, but it does give you a whole bunch more features. You're right. So,
well, one of our members is he's a production guy.
Yeah,
and he put us onto the
there you go.
yard, and it's working really good for us. So
good. Yep.
Thanks.
John, can you explain again what you said worked for the piano in the live stream?
It was we put a mic up, probably about a couple foot, about halfway up the back of the piano, off to one side, aimed it straight at the soundboard on the piano, and but it had to be a good quality mic. We were doing that. We had a mic back there. First month or so that we did this, and the piano, every time she played it, it sounded like just real tinny.
Yeah.
And,
the challenge, as many of you know, is the vocal mics are not necessarily good at picking up broad ranges. And that's why they're not as good for instrumental, and they also get overpowered. So you are kind of looking for a specialized mic. We always use, I'm trying to remember what we rented for that solution. They were XLR powered. I think they were Behringer branded mics that were kind of specific for picking up ambient sound. They weren't excessively expensive, but they weren't cheap.
Yeah.
Like I think the set was a couple $100 that we used. All right, let's go to John.
That's me.
Oh, let's go to Taylor. Sorry.
Picking up on just kind of the two things that have been talked about. Also, if you can spring for recording a piano, and I don't normally record guitar, but I would think a large diaphragm condenser mic would in the piano would be ideal. If you can spring for that, you can get decent ones for a few $100. Like an AKG would be kind of maybe a step up from Behringer, and then they keep going. Back to the streaming, and Keely had asked this question earlier, and I wanted to touch base on it again, but the overlaying presentation software, OBS.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to throw a volunteer into OBS.
No, please don't.
But like we have Pro Presenter, we don't do much with it, but just for presenting stuff live in person. And so you started to talk about it, but that was kind of my other point or question was using, I don't know if you've used Pro Presenter with live streaming, but to incorporate some of that.
So I I haven't. I haven't used ProPresenter to do live streaming. I've used it to put services together. So I have to say I'm not familiar with it. I've used OBS. I like it. It's free. The price is good. So if for that kind of next level, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's got a technical hurdle. There's another one. Somebody just put into the chat, the XSplit broadcaster. What I would say is, well, OBS, and by the way, it's what Open Broadcast System, is cheap and affordable. For those of you who are listening, it's not the most elegant. It's not the easiest to use. And there's definitely better paid software out there if you're ready to move to overlaying and graphics and things like that. You know, you may want to be in a setting where you're showing slides while music's playing in the background, that kind of stuff. That's where some of these other solutions that we've just touched on come in. Have you used ProPresenter to do live stream stuff?
Not for live streaming, no. I've used it for a number of years with in different settings, but it's only just been for, you know, kind of in-house presentation, and it's mainly just lyrics for songs.
Yeah,
primarily my use, but not for live streaming. So
all right, let's go to Ben.
Thank you for this. This is great. So, greetings from Pueblo, Presbytery, in Colorado. And my question is: are there other options besides the two encoders that you recommended that you would recommend, since it's kind of hard to find those?
Sure. Well, unfortunately, it's hard to find anything right now. So the AverMedia, there are some higher end options that I like. Blackmagic has a host of different products. They have the ATE and Mini Pro. They have. I saw somebody in the chat mentioned it's a little bit older.
Time for lunch.
It's called. Oh, my Alexa's telling me to go eat. Blackmagic Pro Presenter. Like there are some options. I'll actually put the link in the chat real quick. So yeah, let's see. I should say that one of the things you might find is that a lot of these are labeled for gamers because a lot of gaming. So if you see things and you're like, why is everything labeled for gaming? The reason is that a lot of gamers who are gaming on like computers or on consoles are streaming. So we actually overlap that a lot of this stuff is branded for gamers. Nothing wrong with it. It works the same. I just put the link in the chat to B&H where for their whole category of kind of these live streamers. And as you can see, they're almost all notify when available, pre-order, sold out, and things like that. So pretty much webcams, all this stuff within weeks just vanished between supply chain issues and increased demand. But basically you're looking at AverMedia, Elgato, Hoppage, and Roxio. They have one from Pengo Technology I've never heard of. I've used Roxio, I've used Hoppage, I've used Elgato, and I've used AverMedia. Right now I like the AverMedia and the Blackmagic one's the best. Just because they integrate better. Okay. Let's go to Peter.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I started by using OBS. And transitions were extremely easy.
Yes.
As long as I prepared well enough.
Exactly.
And also I like that I could either way, pre-recording or streaming, I could, really tweak the PowerPoint screens and all these things. Flexibility was great. And then I moved to Zoom, and then we started doing communion and having interactive things. However, I've noticed that I've been using Zoom, but Zoom doesn't readily allow transitions as easily. Do you have any, to go to share screen, and then I've changed the grid when we're doing piece reading, or
Yeah. So I think it's a really interesting question, and this kind of gets beyond the technical, but I think it's really relevant. Is, you know, Zoom is not designed for kind of broadcast type stuff. It's designed for meetings like this. It's designed for webinars like this. And even when you screen share, what I've noticed is that even if you screen share and like play a video, it tends to not play smoothly. Sometimes you luck out, but it's been my observation that trying to play a video over Zoom just doesn't seem to work well. So I think part of what you've kind of got to ask is, you know, for what a lot of us are doing right now in the immediate future, I think Zoom's great, right? It allows people to collaborate, it allows people to meet and to interact. Once we're kind of in what I call the hybrid space, where we're still trying to do online stuff, but we are gathered in sanctuary spaces for like group gatherings, appropriately social distance and things. That's the point. I think we've kind of got to decide a strategy. What's most important? Is it most important to have the meeting type feel that Zoom offers, or is it more important to have a broadcast that people can like tune into and watch? You know, my home church that I grew up in, they've done all Zoom, right? It's a smaller setting. They're probably never going to do a broadcast type thing. It's not that large of a community. And probably even once they are allowed to meet, they'll just kind of have one person on Zoom sharing the whole service. So that, I think, gets into more of a strategy question. What's the trade-offs? If it's production value, you got to go with OBS and broadcast. If it's kind of the interactive meeting feel, you've got to stay with Zoom and sacrifice some of the technical capabilities. Unless you want to try and like show videos across Zoom, which seems to be fraught with challenges. But I think it's a value question of like what's the most important thing. Okay, let's go to Rebecca.
I know that Zach uses ProPresenter and they've been doing live stream, so he can give a little bit of an explanation as to how that works with the graphics.
Go, Zach.
Yeah, so with ProPresenter 6, there's an alpha key module that you can get that allows you to use any sort of like black background with text as an overlay on top of a video, like a live video, and it makes the black transparent. That's a free module with ProPresenter 7, so the new update with that, it's built in as a capability, so you don't need to buy it separately anymore. And then we run that into a broadcast switcher and use that as a key on top of our live feed. So just that's how we've been doing that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Ben, did I answer your question or no? I can't remember.
You got it. It was about
okay.
the...
Yes. All right, good. So we are a little past 11:30. I thank you all for tuning in. I was kind of blown away when I saw the number of people who signed up. I think it's fitting. I shared my wrong screen with you to show you exactly what can go wrong with live stream, but thank you for tuning in. I saw a couple of things in the chat. I did record this whole thing. I'll probably actually overlay the slides correctly so you don't have to kind of look at the split screen. If you ask a question in the chat, I'll try and get to it. But also, don't hesitate to email me if you've got questions. What I'm impressed by is a lot of you are kind of looking at higher end solutions, which is awesome. If you're at a point where you're just trying to do basic stuff, go for it, do your best, and keep up the good work. I think this is really a push and a challenge that we all needed. If I can be of any help to any of you, please don't hesitate to ask. So thanks again for tuning in and take care.